Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. I have with me Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, who's, as a matter of fact, written a very incisive article that actually caught my eye when he sent it to me, and it made me to think that this is something that we need to discuss: the India-China border, if there is any, for that matter. Firstly, sir, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adi. Thank you for inviting me.
Sir, after about 2 years of this standoff, actually approaching more than that, time is just flying by. Uh, what do you think the current situation of the border is, considering the factor that both the armies kind of keep shifting their posts? There was a clash in Yangtze last year, late last year, and post that there have been some amount of diplomacy, very at a very minute level. Just to open this discussion, sir, where do you think both the relations stand as we speak?
Okay, thank you, Adi. Uh, it's a valid question. See, there are many facets of the relationship with China. Line of actual control is a very important part of it, but it's not the only part of the relationship that India has with China. On the on the border, which is actually the one of these sore points that we have, there are contradictory positions that India and China have taken. The External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, has said the situation is not normal because India will not agree, he said, to any attempt to change the line of control unilaterally. Now, we have seen what Wang Yi has been saying for some time, what Mauning, the spokesperson, has been saying. And recently, when Qin Gang visited India, he also said the same thing. Similar, there is a kind of institutional position taken by the Chinese hierarchy, which says that we should put the boundary into a proper place, means push it away in bilateral relations, and work to get the borders under what they're saying normalized management and control. Now, nobody is explaining what is normalized management and control, because and many issues can come on discussion as to what do the Chinese mean by normal, which means is that for them the existing situation on the border is normal, which is not so for us. We say it is abnormal, and which has been oft repeated by the External Affairs Minister. Then, of course, it also implies that the Chinese do not want to, if it is normal, they don't want to proceed towards any conflict resolution or next steps here, because it's normal. They're saying it is normalized border. So if it's normalized border, they don't want to get on with some kind of discussion on it. So there is no de-induction, there is no de-escalation on the cards. That's a very difficult issue. And third is that PLA has got a large presence there, closer to the borders, which wouldn't exist till 2020. Intensive infrastructure being built. Obviously, there is an attempt to keep geostrategic pressure on India and also retain a threat in being. So if all these things you put together, it is certainly not normal. So what normalized border and normalized management and control of the border is being spoken about? That becomes a very critical issue, despite the fact that we can discuss the buffers which have come up later. So that is one part. But then on different planes, you can there's a matching of minds on Chinese Indian position, though we may not have spoken together, but we have similar positions on Ukraine. We have had a trade rising up in a steady manner, 135 odd $1 billion, which is a substantial trade that we have with China. And then on many other fora on climate change and many other international issues, we are on some kind of parallel tracks. We are also G20 this year, the SCO this year, the BRICS meeting this year. So, when you all add up, so there are different planes and different levels on which the relationship is moving.
Indeed, sir. Uh, a lot of contradictory thought process for this particular setup would be that how do you trust a country that periodically comes and jumps on you on the border, and a lot of standoffs, face-offs, fist-offs, I'm not sure of that, have been recorded but not openly reported between 2020 Galwan and 2022 Yangtze. There have been reports about 5 to 6 of them. How do you kind of bring about what the Chinese kind of want to say normalized conditions when you have incidents like this happening regularly, sir?
So exactly the point of view. Now, on the Eastern Ladakh side, the Chinese have managed to, and the Indian side discussing together the 17 rounds of talks and 12 rounds of WMCC, they have managed to create some kind of buffer zones. Buffer zones astride all the excess routes that were towards excitation. So thereby nearly fixating the whole thing. These buffer zones can be varied distances, as we have spoken earlier also, between 2 kilometers to 7, 7, 8 kilometers. So these buffer zones, so when you create buffer zones, it's kind of fait accompli that comes to us. But all the other areas beyond Eastern Ladakh, and Eastern Ladakh still have one or two issues to be resolved, have been instances of Chinese moving forward. So when we have been speaking on the word salami slicing for so long, which actually means you gradually, slowly keep slicing territory till you come to end time when then your strategic aims or your strategic thought process has been met. Thomas Schilling, when he wrote first time, he mentioned that it means that you want to achieve an end, but you don't want to raise the issue to a level which leads to a conventional war or conventional breakout of hostilities. So you are gradually doing it. So what you are referring to, that there have been other instances like Yang said, they said it happened last year also. Means, 2021 or 20. It happened 2022 also, and many other areas probably there have been clashes. It's all that continual attempt to prod around into various places to say where are weaknesses possible which can be Islami sliced. So after having done what they did in attempted to do in the Eastern Ladakh area, they're attempting to prod and to find out which other areas that they could pierce through and occupy a little more territory. Now, fortunately for us, that we have the Indian Army has moved up in a big way, and the Chinese have learned it. It's not so simple to add on to more salami slicing or take inching in forward like what happened in Yangtze for last 2 3 years. In other areas, it is apparent that it creates serious anxiety on our minds because we know that there are attempts regularly being done to prod around on the line of actual control.
The conventional thought process says that any action like this done by the Chinese, not just with the Indians but anywhere else, is strategic messaging. Is this the Chinese way of actually messaging that these are the areas that need to be brought into the discussion of, for example, uh, uh, buffer zones? So wherever you've had clashes, are these the areas which are going to be next falling into the discussion of buffer zones?
Look, there may be many views on the issue of buffer zones. Personally, I feel buffer zones benefit the Chinese more. And this is not a long term view. This is not a long term decision taken on how borders ought to be managed. We are 21st century. 21st century, there is geomapping possible. There is most difficult areas you can find out which decide a line. But this buffer zone suits the Chinese PLA quite a bit. It pushes the Indian Army away. It saves them from being on tenterhooks of guarding these areas. And then, of course, it can prod. Now, to answer you, would the Chinese be attempting to expand beyond Eastern Ladakh and seek more and more buffer zones? Well, they would certainly like to do so. I mean, if it's an advantage to the Chinese, they would like to occupy some kind of heights or some kind of watershed and then say, okay, we have occupied it. Now there is a 2 kilometer buffer zone, so you go 2 kilometers other side. And, this way, kind of protect themselves from any escalation or any, the hostilities increasing into some kind of a level. I would say that if this is so, firstly, we have to ensure now that there is no more successful attempt by the Chinese on any salami slicing. We should not allow them to occupy and then talk about buffer zones and create a fait accompli for us. We should not take on these fait accomplis in this manner. It must be denied, and I am sure that the Indian Army is now prepared. If you see what's happening in Yangtze and other places, Indian army is prepared that there's no Salami slicing. So to say if they are not able to venture and occupy other areas outside Eastern Ladakh, then there is no connotation of any additional buffer zones coming up into other areas. We should not permit it. We have decided a line of actual control. We must guard it the way it is supposed to be guarded against a belligerent enemy.
Two parts of a buffer zone, sir. One, I'd like to understand your perspective with regards to how it benefits China. And secondly, when the Chinese sign off on a buffer zone, isn't it the Chinese also kind of acknowledging the, I won't say the final border as per se, but a final sort of a line that gets created between both the countries, especially in the areas where the buffer zones have successfully been created, sir. So, both the sides, how would you like to comment on it, sir?
So first is a line of actual control as it came up in 1993 in the Peace and Tranquility Agreement was not delineated. It was not marked on map. In fact, if you see the writings of Chou Enlai in December '59, subsequently when Chou Enlai spoke in April 1960, he said clearly that the line should have proper longitudes and latitudes, and it's not marked by that. So actually speaking, and a line means a line between two parties, decided by two parties as to what's the line. Now, there is just no line of this kind where two parties have decided what's the thing here. So the whole concept of a line of actual control, starting with 1993 agreement, was flawed, incurably flawed, because we did not decide a line between two parties. So that's one part of the story, is that which line are we talking about? We talk about a line. The Chinese talk about a 59 line. They claim that our line keeps changing, it's not steady. We say 1959 line has no sanctity. It is unilaterally you decided one draw a line, say ye hamara hua, this is our line. What basis, what logic have you given it to a 59 line? So the fact is that there is no line per se, and to say that the line can get fixated, impossible. It can't be done because we take the border from the British, which is the Johnson line, which includes near the Kunlun range. So they're different, and they also don't recognize the McMahon line, which is
Exactly.
so both sides within Johnson line or the other side McMahon line not acceptable to the Chinese. So there is no via media on the basis of it. Now, to ask the first question that you asked, are the Chinese trying to fix it? Now we're talking about only a narrow portion of the total border, which is eastern, not very narrow, but a portion of the eastern Ladakh border where buffers have been established. Now, how do buffers benefit them? They are saved from the fisticuffs and the brawls and the gutham gutha that we used to have regularly over a period of 10 years. They protected themselves and pushed Indian troops slightly away. They would be taking advantage of ISR and watching what's happening buffer zone, and so they have a area. Now, I won't say that they have reached the 59 line, but many of these areas, they would be in a position to say, okay, they could be more satisfied with what they are occupying. So there is no line decided. But I think the Chinese have reached a plateau by denying. Now, here they have not Salami sliced us like they did in the South China Sea. My argument is that they have denied us patrolling rights. So if they denied us patrolling rights, because there was no it was not a territory we were occupying, right? Line of control. We sit at the edge of the line of control and hold it against any Paki adventurism against us. In this case, we were only patrolling to a line of actual control, and we were not sitting there. So, there was no fixated decision arrived at earlier. Now, with the buffer zone coming up, we are now located permanently close to where the buffer zones end, to say the Chinese are not infringing it. So there is a difference which has happened in last closer to 2.5 years, that we have now made us occupying a line as close to buffer zones as possible, so that the Chinese do not infringe us. So there is a fixation that has come up now which didn't exist till 2020. And similarly, I would say that on McMahon line also all along we had troops around. We were patrolling in a McMahon line and other areas, but now we are there. We are located there. So there is a kind of many steps forward which have been taken up in the course of from 2020 onwards, because we are sitting there. We have reserves there. We react to that one. So it is not that there is a line in permanence, but then there is something that we have changed the posture in the entire border, 3,488 kilometers, wherever we could do so, where there ingress possible, we are occupying there, thereby making it little more fixated in nature.
That's the key to it, that there has been a certain fixation which has happened in certain areas. And I mean, to the advantage or not, that's a different discussion altogether, and I'm not
Yeah.
wanting to say this is good for India or bad for India. I'm just trying to analyze the ground reality with regards to fixation of a certain line that we've created, and I think you've
Yeah.
brought it out very nicely, sir. But the counter argument to something like this is that with the Chinese today, you have to have a certain position of strength. Uh, if they have fixated us in a certain area by doing their actions in 2020 and so on and so forth, is it possible that we could fixate them in certain areas where we feel there are certain vulnerabilities towards our end, and by conducting certain actions, we would should be able to negate those vulnerabilities to a large extent, sir? Certain or a
So,
large.
so Adi, I would venture it that we would have done this. See, when we say that the kind of infrastructure being developed by the Chinese all along in the Tibet and the Xinjiang region, and the placement of formations and troops that is brought closer to the borders, including the roads that is building very close to the border and bridges across Pengong, so and all other places. So he has built up a threat in being to us. His location there and the infrastructure becomes a threat in being, which we are also responding in a measure to say, okay, if there's a threat in being existing on the borders with China, we are also prepared in that manner and accept that okay, this is a threat in being, and so we have taken a response. So let's put it this way. Now, in doing so, our own location as close to the line of actual control as possible would also raise some hackers and anxieties on the PLA side. And why shouldn't it? If we are located at Yangtze top, and he knows that we are in substantial strength to ward away 200, 300 of his soldiers which came in that fisticuffs, and we stood our ground and we had substantial forces, we would also become a kind of anxiety for the PLA, saying that the Indian army is, unlike previous times, also located in a similar manner all along the border. And that anxiety would also leave him to create garrisons or posts in proximity. That didn't exist for the Chinese also earlier. So there is a automatic quid pro quo happening here, and I presume, and see, if you say some of these garrisons or some of these posts he had all along, which were scantily kept, not many people, you see now they have enlarged. There's bigger habitat there. There's more movement of people there, which means it that they have also got anxious because we are located there.
Hmm.
So there is an elevation of levels here on the border.
That is, I think, if I may take a positive look at what has happened between both the countries on the border, I think that would be a pretty large positive that the China. I mean, of course, a lot of people say the Chinese have us stuck there. I would also look at it that we've also got them stuck there. So it's not that it's not just a win for one side. It's actually both of us fixated on that place. There was an article, sir. Please.
Yeah, please, I believe.
So there was an article in the Diplomat recently which spoke about how Modi is viewed within China. He's known as the immortal man. They are more fixated on towards personalities and the personality-based cult, because I guess that's how their culture is. Xi Jinping, so it's सब कुछ उसी का है and all that. But having said that, the recognition by the author with regards to the power of India and the growing power of India, the growing substance of India, was pretty clear when he stated the factor that initially the India-China relations, if they were sour on the border. Today, if you look at it, it's a whole gambit of a situation where you're kind of uh, engaging with the Chinese in a lot many different aspects, and this engagement can be positive or negative. SEO, BRICS, and a whole lot of positive things for the rest of the world. And the negative is we never used to be supplying arms to its neighbors. We never used to be doing a whole lot of other things that we're doing in terms of the industry and the semiconductors and this and that. So, how do you think this relationship has evolved? And has China today, by the sheer factor that this kind of stuff is being discussed within China, recognized India as a credible threat going forward?
So I would use the word threat here. Now, I'll say that if the Chinese are insisting that you have a normalized border management and control, why do the Chinese want normalized border management and control, despite that the threat that we have spoken of previously? Now, fact is that nobody can deny India's rise also. I mean, we have then taken dramatic steps forward in the course of last so many 9 years. We are a power to reckon with. We are also a country which is light, Whether I mean, let's me say that as a country, if you go to, I've been 4 years in Africa. If you go to any foreign country, India is taken as a nice country. It is a likable
Friendly,
country,
likable.
friendly, good relationship, good, whatever the rationale, and so, and we are rising, we have a say. The prime minister says his mind in the SCO in Samarkand, saying it's not an era of war. So we have a standing of this. We When we want to vote, we want to vote the way we do. It is not non-alignment. It's not. I mean, you call it strategic autonomy. I think we have come of age. We have a we have feet to stand off and talk, because we are largest growing economy in the world. And whatever they might say, the digitization itself which has happened in India has got world's eyes picked out. So the fact is, and we have a 1.5 1.4 billion market. Nobody can forget India and leave us out of the world affairs. So the Chinese will also notice it. So they say, yeah, okay, there is a border issue. Let's put it behind us. Let's move ahead. We both nations are rising up. Let's talk sense. Let's talk trade. Let's talk economy. Let's match up our minds on climate change. Match up our minds on Ukraine. Let's build up on other issues. Now, all this is very lovely. We do want to have relations with all the countries. Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. But the fact is that there is a bugbear and there is a public opinion now which is strident. The people are anxious that they did something on the border and we lost 20 bravehearts. So the point is that there is a threat in being. You have now two things which are trying to outweigh each other. This is geopolitics. This is how you manage it. So, we have to manage both all this situation together. If it is 21st century and if China wants goody goody behavior, let's move forward, demarcate the line, demarcate the line, sort out the de-induction and de-escalation, and move ahead. But no, we don't want to do that. That Damocles sword we will retain on you lifelong, and we want to do everything else other than the border. How will you detach two things? Yeah.
That is the big challenge. And the words that the Chinese speak today are much detracted from the actions on the ground, which brings me to the next point with regards to Xi Jinping and Modi. Uh, we will see both of these guys coming into face to face contact in this year at least twice. Uh, the last time was cordial, if I may. There was not much interaction. It was probably just a much talked about, much analyzed hello. But how do you think this situation where Xi Jinping will have to land into India? Uh, if he doesn't, then he kind of loses face. If he does, he has to make some sort of a gesture towards India for it to be a successful visit for him. And the Chinese are kind of quite edgy about the fact that whenever their president goes out, it has to be a successful visit. Do you think all this is basically trying to create a situation between both the countries to kind of have this visit go by successfully? And uh, I think I lost you here, sir. Can you hear me?
Last part.
Ah, okay. Let me just repeat. So, do you think
Yeah.
that the Chinese are trying to create a favorable situation for this particular two visits to go by, which are based in India and unavoidable? Uh, is that one of the factors that the Chinese want to bring about a normalization within the two countries so that they could move forward, mull this particular situation over, and kind of create some sort of a balance?
Okay, actually, there are three meetings, three guaranteed meetings. We know about the SCO in May. We know about the G20, which is a big thing in September. There is also a BRICS meeting to take place in South
BRICS.
Africa. And BRICS has caught the world's imagination. While we may downplay the issue, but BRICS can't be downplayed. No, people talk about a BRICS currency. Mexico wanted to join here, and there are Saudi Arabia, which is keen on BRICS. And if BRICS actually gets BRICS has got its own bank now, so finally when BRICS has got power here, and India has suddenly become a leader. It's not suddenly, but we become a leader of the global South, as has been stated, that we want to project the global South's requirements to the G20 forum, saying that, okay, you're G20, the top 20 economies and organizations, but this is what this global South wants. So we are becoming a voice of global South. You can't avoid it. Now, these three meetings that take place with President Xi are very important to us also. As important to China, it's as important to us, to India, of the second largest economy, the largest economy in terms of PPP, the second largest economy, the largest manufacturing hub of the world, the largest innovative economy of the world, China. You just cannot leave China out of the global affairs. It is understood. So I'm sure that behind the scenes there must be many wheels churning and things moving forward. Every visit doesn't have to be successful. I know people have said G20 finance minister and G20 foreign minister did not come out with a communique. There was a common document that came out. Uh, Suffice it to say that at least they followed through. There are a large number of issues agreed upon. Some issues had problem. Ukraine war just cannot get around because the blocks are different. But having said that, I'm sure that by the time President Xi comes here, there would be some progress behind the scenes on getting something in even keel. Not on the border, but otherwise, I think there would be some kind of there should be some kind of progress. The wires must be burning. The diplomats must be having overtime as to how to manage these next 6 to 7 months. Very critical in the lives for India, and as critical for China.
Last word, sir. We've looked at how this entire game is from the Chinese perspective. We've spoken about them creating a certain situation for us. By India's adamancy about holding its position with regards to the border, is India in its way kind of pushing the Chinese to say, listen, whatever, we've had enough of this 75 years. Sit down, talk about the damn border, fix it. Let's become friends after that. Otherwise, you stay your way, let's trade, let's do whatever it is. There is no warm relations between us till that time, knowing very well that the Chinese also get hurt by this particular factor. It's not easy for the Chinese to have a growing superpower next to it and not have good relations with it. So,
So I think there is merit in what you are arguing about, and I would say that let's think it this way: uh, that we will not allow, and I'm talking about the future. We will not allow any more salami slicing across on borders. We are prepared for it. So there is no further situation which will be created on the line of actual control or McMahon line or the central sector, which will bring the issues back into heat the way they were existing earlier. So there is
hmm.
some kind of status quo. So we say we are prepared for that situation, and we also accept that there is a threat in being. Having said that, I think it is time to say, yeah, you just get on with geo mapping. Why? How can you say there are five treaties existing, agreements existing, based on a line of actual control which both parties don't have? So you start off a technological mission between two sides to say, okay, let's grant it where we are sitting today. Okay, we decide a line of actual control and say, okay, this is an interim line, or you give it any other nomenclature, and you enter a belt of control if you don't want to call it line of actual control, and create a just tuning satellite imageries and drones and all professional equipment, and draw a line out saying, okay, here and this is the line that we are talking about from today onwards, and get a treaty going or get an agreement going based on a new line. One part of the story. And it has got no relevance to border settlement. It has got no relevance to our previous line of actual control that we had, and no relevance to the 1959 line, because Chinese have also lost part of 1959 line in this game. Other part is the threat in being. If we are matured countries, civilizational states, centuries old histories, great relationship over a period of time, if that is so, then let's sort out the de-escalation part.
Mm.
There are countries of many kind who have sat down and spoke about force reduction. Why can't we sit across and have a standing commission? See, if all this game, military to military talks which have taken place at co-commander level is a success story, where things have moved forward, where things were acknowledged, and there has been progress steadily, slowly but steady progress. Let's have a military commission that decides on force reductions. We say, okay, and under a verified mechanism, because
Mm.
verification, there is distrust here. There is distrust. You have to build trust. Trust building takes a long time. If that is so, let's have a body which comes and says, okay, you can retain forces, because they have also anxieties of controlling the population of Tibet and the population of Xinjiang and all these things. So, okay,
Yeah.
what was your initial posture? You were in Kashgar, you were in Urumqi, you were in Rudok. Okay, shift your forces back, assure us this one. We will do this kind of. So, there is a force reduction commission. If you want to do serious business on other things and get the normalized way where it is normal to be done, then there has to be stronger movement than what we are saying. You just can't say normalized management and control without doing something about normalized management and control. Then only you can say that we are two rising countries. We must rise properly of that level, and let's talk about issues beyond the line of action. Otherwise, all this while, if there is one more action that takes place somewhere, one more encroachment and incursion or something, then you go back to square one, because public opinions rise, and public opinions on both sides of the border. So there has to be some mature handling on the Chinese side on these issues. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, sir, because the last time when something like this happened, the public wasn't too happy in China. When Yangtze happened, I mean, I was lucky enough to go through some Weibo posts which actually said that what are you doing? That the Indians are not saying anything to you. The last time you went, you've not still come out and said how many people you lost, and you're wanting to take another
So
punga with
that
something.
62 war, they didn't tell us how many died for them. It was
No,
only we came to
Chinese
94.
people. This is the
Chinese,
Chinese
I'm
people.
Chinese. Chinese
Yeah,
I'm
these
talking
are
about.
Chinese people talking amongst themselves. So
Yeah.
I kind of, India, you can't access that. So VPN, and you kind of get into it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a difficult game to keep on translating. But then I
Yeah,
got
right.
these tweets, or whatever they call it,
Yeah.
weebs or whatever, which said that what are you guys doing? This is not the way to handle two countries. You're big. India is not a small country that you can run over. It's a nuclear power. Don't do this. And
Yeah, right.
we are going through COVID, and that was the time when they were going through terrible COVID and stuff like that. So I guess there was a bit of a challenge in that front.
Another 5 odd years, we will be a $6-7 trillion economy. We will be
Absolutely.
fourth, certainly, maybe third largest economy in nominal terms. We will be a force to reckon with. We'll have a presence across internationally in many other issues. So I think there has to be a rethink as to how the whole relationship has to be managed. And the border is actually a foundational issue here. It just cannot be pushed aside. It just cannot be pushed aside, saying you leave the border alone and forget about the threatened being and talk about anything else. It doesn't happen this way.
Indeed, sir. Sir, thank you so much. This was a wonderful discussion. I think nobody's had these kind of discussions for a while now, because I guess people have become comfortable with the way the situation is on the line of actual control, and between both the countries. People have been looking at geopolitical avenues more, where the war is actually pretty hardcore and pretty hot right now. I mean, there
Yeah.
is exchanges all the time. I'm purposefully calling it a war, uh, not loosely, but the game, if I may, is quite strong. But the border remains, and I just hope that us not talking about this is another Chinese ploy to keep our minds away and just create a strategic line there and say, you know what, this is we've not been talking about it. You guys seem to be accepting it, so let's just stick
So
with it.
use a word interim or temporary, or use
Yeah,
some kind of fine language which says that it is for the time being. You decide a border, a line, which becomes the line for the time being. It is sanctified, and it will be subsequently reconsidered when we start talking the larger realm of the border and larger realms of the actual line of actual control. For the time being, there is a need for using some geomapping or some technology usage to come across to some kind of a border.
so and the only factor is that you have with the kind of level of trust between both the countries, where I
Yeah,
think
that is true.
I was reading one of these Chinese diplomats who wrote in Xinhua, or one of these opinion pieces, where he said that the Chinese military leadership needs to contend with the factor that the Indians might create an issue for you the day Chinese actually decide to take any military action in the South China Sea or against Taiwan. So they do consider this as a possibility, and they that was quite eye opening to me, because here is a person who's talking about this sort of a situation which is mostly hypothetical, but in their minds, I guess it's a realistic sort of a thing. So as you said, so there are loads of factors that need to be brought into the game, and there's diplomacy which is obviously going to happen this year, which is going to be very interesting. But
Yeah.
until that time, sir, thank you so much for the insight and the update
Thank
as
you.
to what is happening. Looking forward for more and more in the future. Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you, Adi. Bye bye.